Awund washmaya netqaddash shmach, te'tei malkutach, nehwisu yanach, ekannad washmaya appar حولا لحظات سنكان يومنا واشوق لان حوبين إكنا داب حنان شوق لحيوين لا تانا نسيونا إلا قصن من بيشا متول دي لاخي ملكوثة حيلة تشبحته العالم عالمين Amen. So the topic that came to me, and I try not to resist when that pops into my head, is Matthew chapter 24, and it's an interesting and challenging chapter because we see Jesus starting to predict he's coming to an end, basically the peak of his movement, and he's feeling that he's delivered a lot of the teachings that he wanted to deliver to the apostles and his disciples. He trained them, he sent them on missions, he showed them how to heal. He constantly demonstrated how to live from the God space. He really instilled in them the message of the kingdom of heaven, or the kingdom of God, and how it's going to happen. Now, he knew that such a powerful movement is going to require, it's not going to require really, the nature of these movements, they're revolutionary, and old systems are very strong and very resistant to change. So he knew that as more people join, as more people start transforming themselves into the kingdom, that new challenges will appear. There is a good chance of nations revolting, systems collapsing. And they were in Jerusalem. They were in awe of the temple. The temple, if you put yourself back 2,000 plus years, and you're walking into Jerusalem, the temple was a huge building, very opulent. It represented what Moses had envisioned, and what King David had started for the Jewish people. It was a very powerful place that pulled people in. As I spoke about in previous talks, the prophets saw the issue, the problem with having a central building for the religion, for God's religion, this one God who's supposed to be present everywhere with us, everywhere, every moment of our life, with every breath. Being in one place and having to come and pay homage to that place, and then also the people who control that place also had tremendous power over the religion and the lives of the people. Jesus saw that in line with the prophet's thinking, that place, though it makes people kind of just, their jaws drop when they see it for the first time, because there is nothing like it anywhere else in at least the surrounding areas. Now, if you lived in Rome, also they had those buildings, plus they had the temples. But he knew, Jesus had this feeling that this is not going to last, because the people are not transforming. They're not becoming the people of God. They're not carrying God's message forward the way it was intended to be. And it was becoming a very religious, very contentious, very opinionated, based on the explanation of some of the Torah, and they were also added a lot of writings through the Talmud to kind of keep up with the times, and had struggled also with the religion itself, how to reconcile it with what was going on. Because, as I said, if Moses tells you to do something and then the prophets are telling you to do something else, a lot of the events that took place in their history were being now reinterpreted to match the new times, and they were not quite fitting. A lot of fear, a lot of occupation. So even though the temple was this very powerful presence and Jewish people came from everywhere, to worship there and sacrifice animals according to the Moses religion. They were still under occupation. They had to go through basically Roman checkpoints, pay Roman taxes. So as powerful as it really was more at that point more of a facade, because they did not have the freedom that they were seeking and expecting. Of course, that also created the whole idea of Messiah's coming to help change that situation. They wanted to see the temple freed up from the Roman occupation, freed up from any other government occupation. They wanted full control of the land. So there was a Jewish political movement or movements where messiahs were appearing, trying to carry the sword against the Romans and try to remove that occupation. So this is the time of Jesus, and he is knowing that he created a movement based on peace, based on love, based on forgiveness, based on inclusiveness, based on healing, all these positive energies that he's bringing, saying this is what God is about. This is what we need amongst us. And they're walking in Jerusalem, and the chapter opens with the disciples. It's actually a verse that probably never needs to be explained, but never gets captured in like a church talk or something. But the first verse, and Jesus went out of the temple to go away, and his disciples came up to him and were showing him the building of the temple. They were pointing, they were like excited. This is a huge thing. And for some of them, it might have been the first time to see it. We don't know. Remember, I believe that the disciples were young men. They had not traveled much. Jesus had picked them. Now, by this time, some of them had gone on missions. Most of them have gone on missions, but not necessarily to Jerusalem to see the temple. But he said to them, so he took that moment of them being in awe of the temple, and he took that moment to kind of shake them up. And he said, but he said to them, behold, do you not see all of these? Truly, I say to you, not a stone shall be left here upon another stone, which will not be torn down. So he took their excitement and basically put a big damper on it, saying that this big temple that you're so in awe in or with is going to be destroyed. While Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives, so it's another moment of teaching, came up talking among his disciples, came up talking among themselves, and they said to him, tell us when these things will happen. Now, you just made this very, very powerful prediction that the temple will be destroyed. Can you shed some more light on that? So him understanding that the history of the Jewish people, the history of probably the region, the history of the Romans, he was very observant, and he could make a prophetic prediction like that. But then they basically were saying, whoa, you don't just tell us this whole thing is going to fall apart. We're following you because we think that you're the Messiah. We think that you're the savior of this nation. And now you're telling us that the center of our worship is going to be destroyed. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? So this is where Jesus sounds very apocalyptic. If you put your and this is a warning to anybody listening to this. If you take our understanding of the apocalypse, the end of the world, and so forth, and wear those glasses, the apocalyptic glasses, you can read this chapter and use it as an apocalyptic vision. If you take it as a historic event, as somebody who could look at, today we call them analysts and experts, and we bring them to our news stations, news programs, and we ask them, it's like, oh gosh, why did Russia attack the Ukraine? And somebody probably had predicted that at some point, if we keep doing things the way we're doing them, that conflict was going to fester, build up, and then with the right timing, it was going to happen. And somebody, we probably would have called them apocalyptic at the time, especially if they were Ukrainian and they were saying, you know what, you see this awesome blossoming country that we created over the last 20 plus years, maybe a little longer since our independence. We cleaned up things. We have industry, we have technology, we have the countries buying our resources. We're feeding a lot of the world. This is lovely. But then because of other movements, because of the political side of things, because of the NATO angle, all these things, and what was happening also to neighboring Russia, who used to be occupying that land for many, many years and incorporated it and brought a lot of the people. The people became mixed after 70 plus years of being under the same government. People migrated within the countries, and a lot of Russian natives became part of the Ukraine, and part of the Ukrainians became Russians. But we're looking at what the cracks that were happening a few years ago and building up to the problem. An analyst should have been able to predict what was happening, and though it was against what our rational minds would think, like 2021, 2022. A nation that has nuclear power is invading another nation, and it started with Crimea, and so you could see where things were building up. Now Jesus is seeing those things, and the people who are coming to the temple and are in awe of the temple in Jerusalem, they are they're not thinking, they're not having that perspective. They're just making a pilgrimage, and they were seeing these marble columns and buildings, and so here's this teacher, revolutionary teacher, saying this is not the right path to solving the problems of the world. This religion has moved in the wrong direction, and now it's just a matter of time before the center of this religion is going to be destroyed. So he was in the year 70 AD. That actually did happen. That historical prediction did happen, and the Romans came in and they basically wiped out Jerusalem altogether, left it as a destroyed city, and that temple was completely destroyed and annihilated. If you visit the Holy Land now, they're uncovering some of the destruction, and there are some pieces will never be uncovered because they took those, good marble was not easy to find in Jerusalem and the Holy Land area. So the Romans took some of that and used it in other buildings. People probably took it to into their homes. Dr. Lamza wrote an article many years ago about some of the sites in Lebanon where I believe it's Byblos, but I'm not positive. It's Baalbek. There's that's the Arabic name for it. The English name is escaping me. But there is a temple there that a lot of the remnants of it, when he analyzed it, matches the Jerusalem description of the temple that was built in Jerusalem. So he believes that some of those marbles were taken and they used it to build a Roman temple. So, so now continuing, tell us when these things will happen and what is the sign of your coming and of the end of the world. So now this is why I said this becomes very apocalyptic if you put those glasses on. So that they were, and this is used in many ways that way. So they're thinking, okay, when are we going to win? When is our kingdom of heaven going to succeed? Your teachings, when are they going to basically blossom? And this world that we live in, this idea of the temple and so forth, when is this time going to end? The time of change. Jesus answered, saying to them, be careful that no man deceives you. So one of the first things he's telling them that when I go, and that creates, that void is created, there will be other people appearing to with their own messages of how to solve the problems of the world. So watch out for that. And that continues to happen. That, you know, and anytime there is a leader of a big movement, they disappear, they're ripe to be taken over by somebody who might sound like their previous leader, but is not. And they could, and sometimes they are similar and they can continue blossoming and leading the movement in the right direction, like what happened with the apostles. But also there was a risk that somebody with a different idea who could take the movement in a different direction. So that was part of his warning to them. For many will come in my name and say, I am the Christ, and they will deceive many. You are bound to hear of revolutions and rumors of wars. Watch out and do not be disturbed, for all of these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So he's saying that you'll start worrying. We see that in the book of Acts. As soon as he died, they questioned everything and they ran away from Jerusalem, the site of his death, back to Galilee. And it took some time for them to regroup and start basically remembering what he had told them was going to happen. So, and during those times, so he could feel that there is, his appearance was not in isolation. His appearance, remember, John the Baptizer was speaking right then, and he spoke against the king and ended up being killed by the king. Now, his followers scattered. Some of them joined the Jesus movement. They knew of them because he was in that area. There was probably family relationships and so forth. Some of the followers of John the Baptizer followed Jesus. So that tells you that there was rebellions building up. Galilee was a center of rebellion, but there were also other people thinking that way. We hear about the Essenes. If you studied the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Essene movement, they were also revolting and anti-Romans. The Romans ended up finding them and annihilating that movement as well. So all those were happening around the same time. The Maccabees and their movement. So there was constant resistance of the Romans, and Jesus could see, and he could see that people will be really worried when they hear about these revolutions and revolts. I think I muted myself by mistake for a second. Continuing here, for nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famine and plagues and earthquakes in different places. So again, all these signs that, like we're seeing. I mean, we're seeing. It's so unfortunate that we have the situation in the Ukraine current in front of us on the TV. But if you read all the side stories that are popping up, famines in Africa, famines in the Middle East. Those are countries that were fed by the United Nations through supplies from the Ukraine. So if you put the pieces together, it makes sense. If you view them very apocalyptically, that it's the end of the world, then you have these indicators, and people do use those indicators to say we will never, the world will not be the same. And truly, the world will never be the same after this war in the Ukraine. New thinking has to appear to get us out of it. Some people might think that the end of the Russian government, the way it is now, is the solution. Some people are thinking maybe the end of NATO is the solution. So all these things are happening, but we need a new system to govern the new world the way it is today, the way it got restructured after the destruction of the Berlin Wall and so forth, which we didn't do some of those hard pieces. So it was a bright moment to see the world open up, but then there was some hard work that needed to be done that was not done. Now we are being called, the next generation now, or maybe another generation or two, to do the hard work. That's very similar to Jesus was brilliant in observing that Just because I taught you the new things, it's not going to be a flick of my fingers and things will happen. There will be some turmoil and some changes. And there are some things not related to our movement, but they will need our movement's basic teachings to be able to create the new world. That's so. I don't want to. How am I doing on time? That's the most important thing. Okay, because there are some things I really want to hit before I run out of time, or we can continue this next week. So I'll just continue to talk. A nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and plagues and earthquakes in different places. See, sometimes we also, because an earthquake happened during the war, we might relate it like, oh my gosh, this is causing that, and God is causing all of that. It's that the wars are caused by people, and earthquakes and so forth are caused by nature. But if you're seeing the world with those dark glasses, with the end glasses, and you start connecting these points, you can draw a whole other picture than what is really needed, which is to get us out of the situation that got us into that bad place. Okay. But all these things are just the beginning of travail. Then they will deliver you over to the oppressed, to be oppressed, and they will kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. So now he's taken this moment to teach the apostles that and disciples that when I go, they are going to try to wipe you out. And when they do, some of you are going to actually be caught and killed, which happened to them. But that's just the beginning. You'll have to go through that pain, because that's the world is going to resist a new message that is changing the world. So don't give up, right? And he, part of his teachings is, do not fear death. Fear living under oppression, fear living under, opening your eyes day to day, doing something you hate, working with people you don't want to work for, resisting, worrying, fighting, all these things that are negative in your life. You need to follow the teachings of Jesus to get out of that mode. And one of the things that you will get by achieving that state of peace, state of no fear, like I spoke the last time about, is that if somebody threatens your life and takes it away, you're not in fear of that moment constantly. And when it's gone, you know that your soul is in a better place and that you can move on. So that's all built into it. As I always talk about, the Jesus system, as simple as it is, it has all these key components that you need to grasp and master to be able to not be easily shaken or follow the wrong leader, because you don't have those strong foundations. He talked constantly about the foundations. Okay, be killed, and you'll be hated. So they had to run away. He thought he himself went through that, so he also demonstrated a lot of that. Then many will stumble, and they will hate one another and betray one another. So internally within these movements, some people who don't have the full grasp of the foundations will splinter away, will create a new movement based on some disagreement. And he warned against that. It's going to happen. Okay, we see how many churches are just church against building against building, where two people argued and they could not agree about some specific teaching in the Bible or some verse translation or interpretation, and they open a new branch, and a quarter of the church goes with them, and then they discover that that's not quite right. Some come back, some go and start a third church, and so forth. So that happens in any movement. I've seen that in the Palestinian movements. That what we call the PLO. The PLO has so many different movements. It started as one movement to bring the rights of the Palestinian people back on the table. And in time, they to this day, I think I was reading in about 4 or 5 weeks ago, factions of different divisions were fighting, killing each other in refugee camps in Lebanon over disagreements of who should manage the funding, who should control the security, and so forth. Okay, so they lost perspective. They came together as a political movement to help reestablish, help the refugees basically get their rights and so forth. Now they're shooting at each other and being led by people who have self-serving interests, and they totally lost perspective, and they're killing their own people, and accidentally sometimes on purpose. So what Jesus is talking about is not something that just applied 2,000 years ago. He was teaching a lesson that if I had my choice, I would go speak in the General Assembly and say, dudes, what are you doing? Why are we doing this? Where did you go wrong? The world is now ready for more peace. Why are we shooting at each other and also still using violence to try to achieve peace? It doesn't work. It didn't work. It will never work. You might have some successes and celebrations, but the price is heavy, and it will not last. We see that across every political movement, every nation that's out there. I'm sure all of you will have examples, if you think about it. And many false prophets will rise and will mislead a great many. And because of the growth of iniquity, the love of many will become cold. So he's warning that even people who are good and loving and wanting to see the world change in a good, positive way towards more getting along and less military and less spending on military and hating and borders and so forth. He said, even those people with the length of the struggle, you will lose they'll lose faith, and they'll become discouraged. And some of them might even join the mayhem and become either false prophets, or they join the military and join the war. And we hear about that in the Ukraine. A lot of priests, a lot of ministers, people who are in the healing business, doctors and nurses, are forced to kind of go almost against that to protect their national interest, and they're carrying weapons and they're shooting at the other people. So staying true to the teachings when the time is challenging you is very hard. He's saying it will be hard to hold on to this faith, especially with everything that we will go through early on in the movement and to this day. I think anybody who's living by the Jesus method, by his teachings, will struggle, but if they have the strong foundation, that struggle will mean nothing, because they have constant state of peace and a grounded peace, not something that's artificial. That's the hard work. That the simple message needs a lot of hard work and a lot of digging and a lot of cleaning and polishing and so forth for you to continue to exist, where if somebody shows up with the bad thinking, that you do not change, that you stay true, knowing that if the most expensive price you'll pay is your life, and you should be okay with that. You shouldn't. And I get a lot of pushback on YouTube and so forth, that, it's like there is a point where I will not stop resisting. There's a point where I will not turn the other cheek and use peaceful methods to resolve issues. That somebody will push you, and a lot of them are related to like self-defense, defense of somebody you love, and if you see your child being abused or hit or threatened, a parent, somebody you love, it's okay to switch, and deep inside it is not okay to switch. It's okay. You have to stay true and figure out a way out of these situations, figure out a way never to get into these situations, but also if you do get in them, try to get out of them peacefully. Jesus talks about those things. Okay. Okay. So and because of the growth of iniquity, the love will become cold. But he who has patience to the end will be saved. So here is this is one of the keys of this talk, is stay true to the teachings. Stay true to the teachings. That's your way out of it. You give up early, it's going to pay back negatively. Anytime you give up, anytime you veer away. Now, depending on how far you veered away, the Jesus method has forgiveness, has a way to come back. You can forgive yourself, you can forgive the others, and come back into this movement and stay true to it. And this gospel, and this is the key that I wanted to hit, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached throughout the world as a testimony to all the nations, then the end will come. This is why I say it's not apocalyptic, because think about what he's talking about. He's saying when the teachings of the kingdom are spread across the world. So stay true. A few of you will make it through the initial turmoil, but he's also telling us to this day, a few of us will continue to make it through these turmoils. And the time that the conflict will end when, or the world will end as we know it. See, that's when the end of the world comes, is when the teachings of the kingdom become the teachings of everybody, or the dominant teachings of everybody, when we're all living, chasing peace, chasing love, chasing forgiveness, chasing, treating each other the way we want to be treated. That's the key to this talk. That's one of the keys. It continues that way, and maybe depending on, see, it's about time for me to stop talking. So I'll stop with this verse. So I'm stopping on verse 14, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached throughout the world as a testimony to all the nations. So it's not limited to the Jewish people. It's not limited to the followers of Jesus. It's to all the nations. Then the end will come. Okay? That's not the end of the world. That's the dominance of the kingdom is the end of these systems. And we hit those peaks sometimes, and we think that we're living in peace. Things that we have not solved will fester. The true believers, the people who got us there, a few of them will last to get us through that next wave. That's the message of this chapter. Hopefully, I'll put a marker here, and I'll start with verse 15 next time, because it does talk about also the signs of how things will happen. So with that, I'm stopping. And I'm going to do something that I haven't done before. I'm going to stop the recording and then start it again for the Q&A. I'm going to start separating the Q&A section from the main talk to make it easier for people on who are listening to us on YouTube to get the message versus the QA. Plus, some people who ask about specific questions and we end up answering them, they can go straight to the QA session.